Thank you very much, everyone. It's great to be here, and I just want to say thank you to Kelly and the AEC. It's always a privilege to be a sponsor at any level, and just to have another great year here. It's always great to be in a beautiful location like Santa Barbara as well. So, with that said, I have quite a bit of material. I'm going to try to cram in a short presentation. So maybe I've bitten off a little more than I can chew, but I'm going to give it my best shot, and we're just going to jump right in. So new ag rates. This talk isn't necessarily about solar. This is about new utility rates for the investor-owned utilities. So PG&E and Southern California Edison will be the primary topics I'm going over today. Those of you with meters in MID, whether that's Modesto irrigation or Merced irrigation, and also Turlock irrigation, this really doesn't affect you. But I believe it will affect the majority of the people in this room today. So, in January, there was a decision made by the California Public Utilities Commission. And what that decision essentially allowed is allowing the investor-owned utility companies like PG&E and SoCal Edison to make some pretty significant changes to the structure of utility rates for commercial, residential, and for agriculture. So just to try to keep things limited today, I'm only talking about the ag rates that really apply to all of us in this room. But what they allowed is essentially they've given a lot of leeway to the utility companies to change both the dollar amounts in the peak and off-peak periods, as well as the demand charges, but also more fundamental changes of when the peak period occurs. And that's something it's one of two things I'm gonna focus on today. So, jumping right in, this chart is a basic illustration of what today's rates are and what the coming changes will be. So like I said, in January, the CPUC made this decision. Right now, the utility companies are in the proposal phase of this. So these are proposed rates that are coming from PG&E. The CPUC will then make a decision on what the final rates will be come the beginning of next year in 2018, and then the implementation of all these will happen in 2019. So there's a timeline we'll be discussing today, but just to be clear, these are the proposed rates we are looking at. There will probably be some kind of compromise between what today's rates are and what the utilities are proposing. But the biggest change is that the peak window, which currently for most utilities is noon to 6. During the summertime, that's when energy is most expensive. It's probably a familiar thing for most people, but if anyone in here is not familiar with time of use utility rates, power and energy is most expensive between noon and 6. PG&E is proposing to shift this into the later afternoon or evening actually, and moving it from 5 to 10 p.m. So you can see there the blue line is what the proposed utility rate will be. Now, in addition to changing the hours of when the peak charges will occur, they're also modifying the dollar amount rates with it too. And you can see the peak of the orange line is a little bit higher than the blue. PG&E is proposing to actually lower the peak charge a bit, but then you'll notice that the lowest blue line is raising up quite a bit now. So they're actually increasing the off-peak periods by more than they're bringing down the peak periods, and they're shifting out the window. So that's what I mean by some significant structural changes. It's something to keep in mind for any operator of any kind of energy load, whether it's a pump or a Holer processor, anything in between. First and foremost, be aware of when the most expensive time of day to operate is, and then also be aware that even the periods outside of the peak window are being increased as well. So the net effect of this on every energy user, and again, I'm speaking to everyone. I'm not even talking about solar right now. This is just this is rate inflation in California. It's not something that's new to us, but it's just another way that the utilities are increasing rates. And that is what the net effect is. That is what the result. And we'll see in a couple seconds what the dollar amounts of those effects will be for the shifting window and the off-peak period coming up. But overall, rates are still going up in California. So what I've done is taken the proposed rates from PG&E for ag rates And I've ran 2 simulations. I've done it for a 150 horsepower deep well irrigation pump, and then I also did it for a large Kohler to give us a range of what do the dollar amounts look like, what does this actually mean, because we can look at the period by period and analyze what percentage is increasing here and there, but let's actually talk some real numbers. So for the pump, for 2017 rates versus the coming 2019 proposal, the bills went up 7.4% for the whole year. In dollars, that was adding an extra $4,300 to the annual bill. This was for 150 horsepower deep well out in Snelling, irrigating I think about 115 acres of organic almonds. For the Kohler, the bill went up a little more at 9.9%. We're adding about almost $34,000 to the annual bill. Again, this is mostly coming from the increasing rates in the off-peak period, which if your cheapest time of day is still going up, the bills and the net effect of the bills will be going up too. So that's a summary of what PG&E is proposing. Southern California Edison is very similar, but now I want to switch gears a little bit, and I do want to talk to everyone in the room who has a solar system, anyone who's maybe in the process of getting one, or anyone who has been thinking about it. So this is a different issue in a sense, but still related, and it's related to grandfathering. And I have been getting a ton of questions, our whole office has been getting questions on what happens to me if I have a solar system. Am I still getting credited? Is my investment still, is it still paying off? So, with grandfathering, I'm going to address the existing systems, how it affects pending systems or systems in progress, and then what it means for new applications as well. But before I get too far into it, with grandfathering, there are actually 2 different issues with grandfathering. So, the first one is the grandfathering of net energy metering. And one of my main objectives today, this is the second thing I really want to drive home, is that there's 2 different grandfathering issues. So the first one I'm going to talk about is net energy metering. This is the solar tariff that all solar systems are governed by, and it says you get to sell back your energy to your utility at the current retail rates, or what we like to call the dollar for dollar crediting. So this was a 20-year period that you are locked into from the date of your permission to operate, or what we also call the PTO, or the solar anniversary, your true up, so on and so forth. You're probably familiar with this a bit. This is not changing. The decision the CPUC made in January, the proposals that the utilities are coming back with, and ultimately whatever the middle ground compromise of this decision coming early next year is, this does not affect the net energy metering tariff. You still get dollar for dollar credits. You will always sell back your energy for 20 years from your permission to operate date at the current retail rates. This applies for new systems as well. So once this program is implemented, once the rates are changed and the time of use period shifts, if you go solar, you install a system, you still are grandfathered for 20 years under the net energy metering tariff. Now, the grandfathering that is bringing a lot of confusion for a lot of people is what I'm going to talk about now. So we've got our net metering intact. That is protecting solar investments, and we'll see how in a minute it actually is bringing better yields than ever for solar investments. But there's another type of grandfathering, and that is regarding the actual time of use window. So there's 3 categories that everyone in this room will fall into that has solar or is thinking about solar. There's a 10-year grandfathering period, there's a 5-year grandfathering period, and there is essentially no grandfathering. So what is being grandfathered? That is really the question. What is being grandfathering is the time of use window. So today, peak hours are between noon and 6. Tomorrow, or in 2019, they'll be 5 to 10 p.m. That is what's being grandfathered, is when your peak period is, and that's important for solar because our best solar production hours are obviously during the middle of the day, and a lot of those hours occur between noon and 6. So it's a good thing to be getting credits. Shifting that window out does have a negative impact on the solar, although it's made up for by off-peak rates. But let's jump into the criteria for being grandfathered. So the first important date is January 31st of this year. Applications that were given or submitted to the utilities by January 31st are eligible for the 10-year period. The caveat is that they have to be completed or have a final building permit by July 31st to lock in that 10-year time use window. Let me back up real quick. All existing systems are grandfathered on that 10-year period as well because the systems are already completed. Another thing I want to note, when we're talking about grandfathering periods, we always count from the permission to operate date. That's another confusing part of this I've encountered, is that it's not 10 years from when they changed this time of use window, it's 10 years from when your system came online and was energized. So, to be grandfathered for 10 years, you had to have had your application in by January, and we have to get these projects completed, at least to the final building permit stage, by July 31st. If you did not make the January 31st deadline, or you made the deadline but you can't get the project finished and get the final building permit by July 31st, then you could be eligible for a 5-year window, locking in that noon to 6-hour period. What it takes to get that 5-year period is to get the project done before the CPUC decides on the final rate structure. So again, we're in the proposal phase. There's a lot of to be determined details, but at the very latest, by February of next year, we are expecting all of the CPUC's decisions regarding these time use hour window changes and the actual dollar amount fluctuations. So if you want to put in an application today and you can get your project done, to be conservative, I'd say by the end of the year, you will likely receive a 5-year grandfathering window. And then essentially, if you don't have your projects if they're not completed by early next year, you will not have a grandfathering period. When these rates and time use structures are implemented in 2019, they'll just be going on to the new program as is. Again, 2019 is the expected implementation of these rates. The beginning of next year is the expected decision. So all of this is just an effort to give the best information, to separate facts from what's to be determined, just to start planning. You've got a couple of years. This isn't a call of emergency necessarily, but it's just really trying to give as much information as we can and when we have it. And like I said, in January when the CPUC made this decision, this caught the entire solar industry off guard. This decision was made very quickly, a couple weeks before January 31st, and we found out literally days before the 31st that we had to get some last-minute applications in just to qualify for these periods. So it's moving quickly. The next logical question is, how does solar pay back once we implement these rates in 2019? I'm just going to run through these 2 examples again and how they look on solar. For the 150 horsepower pump, it still has a 3.3-year payback. This is running it on the proposed rates that PG&E has given, and it's still resulting in an 80% savings. So that would be the energy charges we are eliminating for that pump. That came out to about $49,000 per year. For the Holder, we actually saw a savings up to 90% of the annual bill being eliminated, paying for itself in less than 3 years, and saving about $374,000. And this brings me to the last little point I want to talk about is the proposed rates actually include lower demand charges. So those of you familiar with solar know that the demand charges are not eligible to be offset by solar credits. So if demand charges start going down and energy charges keep going up, a greater portion of your offsettable bill is now available to be offset by solar. So this is an interesting silver lining, call it that, for existing solar customers and also future solar customers. We can potentially get up to a 90% savings level now for large energy users, which, again, anyone who's familiar with these payback models and the typical numbers, usually 75 or 85% is a good case scenario. 90% is is doing very well. So with all that said, again, I just wanted to give some information to all of you. This is affecting you whether or not you have solar. For the solar customers I'm talking to today, your investment is intact. This is why you bought solar, is for when the utility comes and makes modifications to the rates, you're still locked in for 20 years under that selling back dollar for dollar. The only question is what hours are changing and when those dollars occur. But either on today's model or tomorrow's model, it still is effectively the best way to manage your utility costs. It's the only reliable way to reduce your costs by anywhere from 60 to, we can see 90% on a year after year basis for a long-term period that hopefully would help your business make better decisions for long-term planning. And regardless of where you fall, if you're interested in solar or not, or if you've looked at it and it just doesn't work, I still highly encourage you, stay informed on this issue. These rates are affecting everyone in California, all businesses, and it's important to know when your exact peak window is, because it may vary rate by rate. And at the very least, it'll probably vary a little bit utility by utility. I've been focusing on PG&E's proposed rate structure, but if this caught the solar industry off guard, I'm guessing it's going to be catching all businesses off guard a bit. And so it's something that we are really committing ourselves to trying to stay updated and give updates to the ag industry and all California businesses. So stay informed and stay up to date. And with that, I know I gave a lot of information today, and I'm sure there has to be a few questions. So we've got a few minutes. Let's just start fielding any questions there are.
What about the project that started? You're planning on adding on. Under what rule does that come?
Okay, that's a great question. So the question is regarding system expansion. Let's say you have an existing system and now you want to add on to it and expand it more. We saw questions with this regarding the net metering 1.0 and net metering 2.0 policy variations from a few years ago. And I don't believe there's a clear set of criteria to answer that question for the time of use rates. But ultimately, I believe that system would stay grandfathered under whatever category you fall into. With some exceptions. And usually what PG&E has done in the past is they say, if you don't expand your system more than 10% of the original size, you'll stay grandfathered in XYZ category. So to answer your question as best I can, that is something we should go back to CalCEA, which is the lobbying group lobbying against these drastic changes, and it's a group that we as a company work with. For instance, PG&E wants 5 to 10 p.m. to be the peak window. We're arguing for a 2 to 7 p.m. window to try to find somewhere in the difference. The closer back to noon to 6 we can get, the more favorable it is for solar customers. But likely, PG&E and all utilities will give a set of criteria that says you can expand the system by this amount and stay within this grandfathering category. If you go past this mark, you'll be moved into another category. My personal opinion, the way I see it, is even after all the grandfathering periods have been phased out, the new rates are still very favorable when you have solar applied to it, because those energy charges are the ones going up, not the demand charges. And that is what solar can ultimately offset, is those energy charges. Yes.
I was wondering if the on peak during that time of day we were talking about, does it change in the wintertime versus summer? Also, answer this question if you can as well. What happens after the 20 years is up? What's going on 21 years when you're locked in for 20? What happens in the 21st year?
Two great questions. So currently, and let's just talk ag rates, currently for a 5B or a 4B rate in PG&E, summertime has a peak period from noon to 6. Some rates have a part peak period, which essentially bookends the peak period. If we look at the window, you'd have part peak periods and then off peak would be in the very ends of it, and essentially the rates, go up to down and so forth. In the winter time, they only have a part peak rate, which is a larger window, and then you have off peak. So you still have a spike in the day, but it's a lower, longer spike. These new rates that are being proposed pretty much simplifies it. And this is something I meant to give this term earlier, rate flattening. That is what the utilities are going for. That is what their agenda is. Bringing the highs down and bringing the lows up, and essentially simplifying it to where it doesn't matter what time of day you're operating, your rate is going to be very close to the same. They are now giving a peak for summer, a peak window, 5 to 10 p.m., and a peak for winter, 5 to 10 p.m. It's essentially, and the only thing changing would be your dollar amount rates. So the hour structure stays the same for summer to winter. The dollar amount rates change a bit, which is still typical, like we see. Winter would be cheaper than summer, but most of the operation happens during summer season. So think of that what you will. The other question, after the 20 years is up, that is a very good question. We haven't gotten to any net meter systems that have gotten past 20 years. That is something that is still probably being determined in the legislature. I would imagine something of a feed-in tariff. What a feed-in tariff is actually saying is that we will just pay you XYZ for your kilowatt hours produced. People who are familiar with PPAs or things like that, where you're basically being compensated at a flat rate for whatever you produce and send back into the grid. That is what I would imagine it to be. I think there's other people in the industry that would agree with that. But ultimately, that's a to be determined rate, and probably the utilities will do some major studies at that point in time as we get closer to lots of systems coming up on their 20-year anniversary. I imagine the utilities will do a big study and try to determine an economic value for these distributed generating systems or local solar systems, and what benefit the utility gets from that, because there is a benefit. They just need to, I think, utilize it better in how they distribute the energy. There will be an economic value to that. I think that will be the key player in determining what rate you will be getting after that. You will get something, but you will not be on the net energy metered program any longer.
Chad, when it comes to the increasing by 10% of your present installment, do you foresee us, is that the number of panels, or is that of what is being produced? And also, what do you see in the world of technology as far as in the future? Are panels going to get more and more efficient, and is the cost going to stay the same, or are we going to see cost be a little bit better?
Two very good questions. So just to clarify, the 9.9%, which I believe we were talking about, that 10% increase, that was the increase of the utility bill for the Holding facility. So that basically assumed, all things being equal, that this Holding ran as it always did, but now they were operating on rates that had a 5 to 10 p.m. peak window and higher off-peak rates. So that was before any solar was applied to it. That was just the net increase in bills. And I've seen years of utility rates where maybe in the news PG&E says, we've only increased rates 3% this year. Well, there's a lot of different ways to make a 3% average in rates. When you run the effective bill increase for an individual user, I've seen years where bills went up 12%, sometimes 5%, 6%. So none of these net increases are unprecedented. It's just the rate structure that's really the new detail we'll be talking about. The other question regarding solar components, solar technology, we are seeing some big advances in module power density. So what I mean by that is we still buy modules that are the same frame size, which is good, because if, let's say you have a rock hit a panel or something and you want to replace it, if you've got a different size frame now, well, that throws off your whole racking schematic. What they are doing is they're fitting more watts per frame, a lot more watts. And going back to the price question, we're seeing the prices on those premium panels be a very small difference from what we've seen in the past. We used to see a large price difference between, let's say, your good model and your great model. And now that price difference is really being shrunken down. And so with that, if we can fit more watts per panel, that means we can get more power in a smaller space. That means less roof space to take up, a smaller solar structure to build, or in most people's cases, less trees to build. That is where I think the biggest advantage is. If we can fit 10% more energy on the same quarter acre of trees, then that's a great thing for us. So that's where we're seeing the module market go. Inverter markets as well are doing very well. Efficiencies are up to 98.5%. We really can't get much better than that. And additionally, pricing is becoming more and more competitive as the market grows, not just in agriculture, but in all of California and really across the world. These manufacturers are really being pressed hard to provide a great product at a very great price as well. So we're seeing better returns than ever, and when paired with increasing electric rates, it's my opinion that it's just the most effective way to try to at least manage utility costs.
I was wondering if you could be so kind to answer this one. Do you promote microinverters on your big megawatt systems versus, the mainframe inverters?
That's a good question. So a microinverter is one inverter per panel, which completely eliminates the effect of shade losses for solar panel stringing, which is strung in series. And for people familiar with electrical engineering, series stringing is like Christmas lights. One goes out, everything goes out. So microinverters eliminates that because every panel gets its own inverter. If shade hits any one of them, it's independent. About 5 or 6 years ago, most large systems for commercial and ag used centralized inverters, which would be 1 or 2, maybe 3 inverters for a whole system, like a megawatt that takes up about 5 acres. Would have at max 4 inverters, sometimes only 2. What we have done now is, and this happened probably 3 or 4 years ago, is it's kind of a commercial version of the microinverter. It's called string inverters. They are inverters that go up to about 30 to 60 kilowatts in increment sizing versus like a 200 or 300 kilowatt size increment. And so it has the same net effect where it handles smaller groups of the system. So if any one inverter had any point of failure or any issues in that, whether it's in the module part of the system or the inverter, you spread out your risk. You diversify your inverters. They're also more efficient. They're transformerless. They take less space. They can be mounted on the back of the panel itself, and it's slanted and south facing. You can tuck it underneath, which gives it shading, which gives you a little bump in production. Microinverters for a commercial size system, I think that would be a little inefficient on the cost. Now, a lot of residences, that is a good idea. But essentially, the string inverter is the commercial version of that same idea. Well, if that's it, and you have more questions though later on, come find any one of us by our booth, or we'll be out and around the hotel. I know I've given you a lot of information, maybe more questions later. But I just want to say thank you again to Kelly, thank you again to all of you for giving us this opportunity to share just what we think is the most up-to-date information. So if you'd like more, you can always subscribe to our newsletter, or again, just find any one of us. With that, thank you very much.